Hi guys, welcome back to Lily's Little Life Corner. In today's episode, we are going to be talking about why everyone seems to hate your relationship. So a conversation is being had on TikTok about the toxicity of certain relationships, and that is what we are going to be talking about today. Now, it's important for me to make it clear that the kind of relationships that I am going to be discussing today are heterosexual relationships with traditional gender roles. Any relationship outside of that is not going to be discussed today. The toxicity of those relationships will also not be discussed. I must make it clear that this is not me saying that queer relationships, polyamorous relationships, heterosexual non-traditional relationships are not toxic, but it is me saying that I'm going to be focusing on the specific toxicity of traditional gender role heterosexual relationships. That is what I'm going to be discussing today. And that is the kind of relationship that people are discussing on TikTok. So that's what we're going to be talking about. Today, we're not going to be looking at TikToks because there are no specific TikToks that talk about this kind of conversation. Conversation is mostly being had in comment sections. And this is also a part 2 to last week's episode where I talked about bad husbands. Next week will be part 3 where I talk about femcells and whether they are doing more harm than good. Before we get into it, make sure you check out the links in my description so you can find my Tumblr page where I update you guys on anything that is happening with any delays in the podcast, or if I have questions for you guys, or if you guys want to send me ideas for what you want to see on my podcast or even on my YouTube channel. Go ahead and check out the link in that description, and then also my merch will be linked down below as well. And the link to the Vogue article that we will be discussing will also be in the show notes and in the description. Now let's get into it. So as I already kind of mentioned, today I also wanted to read an article. It's a Vogue opinion piece by the author Shantae Joseph, and it was published October 29, 2025, and this is kind of what started the entire conversation surrounding the toxicity of traditional gender role heterosexual relationships. So I want to go ahead and read it for you guys and then discuss kind of my thoughts and opinions and then also continue on this conversation. Shantae writes, if someone so much as says, quote, my boyf on social media, they're muted. There's nothing I hate more than following someone for fun, only for their content to become my boyfriendified suddenly. This is probably because for so long, it felt like we were living in what one of my favorite substackers calls boyfriend land, a world where women's online identities centered around the lives of their partners, a situation rarely seen reversed. Women were rewarded for their ability to find and keep a man with elevated social status and praise. It became even more suffocating when this could be leveraged on social media for engagement and, if you were serious enough, financial gain. However, more recently, there's been a pronounced shift in the way people showcase their relationships online. Far from fully hard-launching romantic partners, straight women are opting for subtler signs, a hand on a steering wheel, clinking glasses at dinner, or the back of someone's head. On the more confusing end, you have faces blurred out of wedding pictures or entire professionally edited videos with the fiancé conveniently cropped out of all shots. Women are obscuring their partner's face when they post, as if they want to erase the fact that they exist without actually not posting them. So what gives? Are people embarrassed by their boyfriends now, or is something more complicated going on? To me, it feels like the result of women wanting to straddle two worlds. One where they can receive the social benefits of having a partner, but also not appear so boyfriend-obsessed that they come across as quite culturally loserish. Quote, they want the prize and celebration of partnership, but understand the norminess of it. End quote, says Zoe Samudzi, writer and activist. In other words, in an era of widespread heterofatalism, women don't want to be seen as being all about their man, but they also want the clout that comes with being partnered. But it's not all about image. When I did a call out on Instagram, plenty of women told me that they were in fact superstitious. Some feared the evil eye, a belief that their happy relationships would spark a jealousy so strong in other people that it could end the relationship. Others were concerned about the relationship ending and then being stuck with the post. Quote, I was in a relationship for 12 years and never once posted him or talked about him online. We broke up recently and I don't think I will ever post a man, end quote, says Nikki, 38. Quote, even though I am a romantic, I still feel like men will embarrass you even 12 years in, so claiming them feels so lame, end quote. But there was an overwhelming sense from single and partner women alike that regardless of the relationship, being with a man was almost a guilty thing to do. On the Delusional Diaries podcast, fronted by two New York-based influencers, Hallie and Jazz, they discuss whether having a boyfriend is lame now. Quote, "Why does having a boyfriend feel Republican?" read a top comment. Quote, "Boyfriends are out of style, they won't come back in until they start acting right," end quote, read another with thousands of likes. In essence, quote, "Having a boyfriend typically takes hits on a woman's aura," end quote, as one commenter claimed. Funnily enough, both of these hosts have partners, which is something I often see online. Even partnered women will lament men and heterosexuality, partly in solidarity with other women, but also because it is now fundamentally uncool to be a boyfriend girl. It's not just these women's imaginations. Audiences are icked out by seeing too much boyfriend content, myself included, it seems, as indicated by my liberal use of the mute button. When author and British Vogue contributor Stephanie Yeboah hard-launched her boyfriend online, she lost hundreds of followers. Quote, "Even if we were still together, I wouldn't post them here. There is something cringy and embarrassing about constantly posting your partner these days," end quote, she tells me, adding that, quote, "There's part of me that would also feel guilty for sharing my partner constantly, especially when we know the dating landscape is really bad at the moment. I wouldn't want to be boastful," end quote. Stephanie Milner, a content creator, also experienced people unfollowing her when she shared a romantic relationship. Quote, "This summer, a boy took me to Sicily. I posted about it on my subscriber section and people replied saying things like, 'Please don't get a boyfriend,' end quote. She admits that her content perhaps becomes less exciting when she gets in a relationship. Quote, "Being single gives you this ultimate freedom to say and do what you want. It is absolutely not every woman, but I do notice that we can become more beige and watered down online when in a relationship, myself included," end quote. From my conversations, one thing is certain, the script is shifting. Being partnered doesn't affirm your womanhood anymore. It is no longer considered an achievement, and if anything, it's becoming more of a flex to pronounce yourself single. As straight women, we're confronting something that every other sexuality has had to contend with, a politicization of our identity. Heterosexuality has long been purposefully indefinable, so it is harder for those within it and outside of it to critique. However, as our traditional roles begin to crumble, maybe we're being forced to reevaluate our blind allegiance to heterosexuality. Obviously, there's no shame in falling in love, but there's also no shame in trying and failing to find it or not trying at all. And as long as we're openly rethinking and criticizing heteronormativity, quote, "Having a boyfriend will remain a somewhat fragile or even contentious concept within public life." This is also happening alongside a wave of women reclaiming and romanticizing their single life. Where being single was once a cautionary tale, you'll end up a spinster with loads of cats, it has now become a desirable and coveted status. Another nail in the coffin of a centuries-old heterosexual fairy tale that never really benefited women to begin with. So that is the entire article, and like I said, I will leave it linked down below, but fair warning, you can only click the link once, and then once you click the link again, it'll take you to a paywall. You can only read the first section of the article, so I recommend saving it, like screenshotting it if you want to go back to it, because that is what happened to me, and I had to go on a private browser to access it again and take screenshots of it, because then otherwise I wouldn't be able to read it on the podcast. But anyway, let's talk about this article. So the first thing that was interesting to me and that I noted was when Shantae says, "There's nothing I hate more than following someone for fun only for their content to become boyfriendified suddenly." This is something that I have experienced also with female creators that I follow, where a female creator will go viral for something that she did, something that she put thought and effort and work into, and then all of a sudden she starts a podcast with her husband or her boyfriend. So yeah, I've definitely seen it happen. Another thing that also I'm going to critique about the article is where she says that heterosexuality has long been purposefully indefinable, so it is hard for those within it and outside of it to critique. I would argue and say that heterosexuality is probably the most kind of definable relationship that there is, unless I am misunderstanding and unless I'm lacking media literacy, which is also a possibility. But yeah, I just feel like that implies or makes it sound like heterosexuality has been like this cloudy, nobody really knows what it is. But I, again, would argue and say that that is the sexuality that is most shoved in our faces. Aside from that, however, I feel like this article is nothing nothing necessarily revolutionary. And I say that not to, throw shade at Shantae and not to be like, ugh, this article isn't even that good. But I say that because a lot of people on social media, when this article dropped, acted like it was, I don't know, something never been done before, like jaw-dropping. I did a really bad job at explaining this, but essentially what I'm trying to say here is that the article that Shantae did was really good, but a lot of different pockets and different communities had already kind of been discussing it. So her article was just kind of like a summary, and then the mainstream kind of TikTokers picked it up, and that's when people started acting as if she had said something demonic or something. Like, people were really angry about the article. So that's what I mean by it wasn't necessarily revolutionary or jaw-dropping. Like, it wasn't anything bad. She was just summarizing what people had already been saying online. When this article came out, a lot of the people that I follow were saying, yeah, like, this is what I've been saying, like, this is what my content has been all about, is that these relationships are no longer serving anyone. But I feel like the reason why people acted so harshly against the article is because it's a truth that they haven't been able to accept, or they haven't been willing to accept. Because like I said, people have been having this conversation, at least on the people that I follow have been having this conversation. And so it feels like, especially when an article is published in such a thing like Vogue, a lot more people are going to see it, and a lot more people are going to have opinions about it, especially, people who disagree. They're probably not following the same people that I'm following, but they probably are following Vogue and seeing what Vogue publishes. So when they saw that article, they were able to finally become aware to the conversation that other people have been having. Another critique that I have of this article is that I wish the author had gone into more of like the why. Why are people seemingly embarrassed to post their relationships? I know she did talk about how some influencers, when they posted, oh, I have a boyfriend now, they lost followers, but that doesn't tell us why they're losing followers. And I know she talked about a couple of comments like the having a boyfriend takes a hit on a woman's aura comment, but again, it doesn't explain like why does having a boyfriend take a hit on a woman's aura. But those are my only critiques. Other than that, I think the article really helped to bring to light this conversation that, again, like I said, we've already kind of been having on the other side of the internet, where we, critique stuff like this. So let's talk about the why. Why is it now seen as embarrassing to have a boyfriend? Well, for starters, like we talked about last week, it feels as though if you spend enough time scrolling on social media, you will eventually come across a woman filming herself or filming something that her boyfriend or husband has done that is just so incompetent, and something that no able-bodied adult should do. As I showed you guys last week, these TikToks include their boyfriends or their husbands packing such a horrific lunch for their wives, such as packing their wives dog food so that they can eat. And that is not that initial post is not embarrassing. That initial post of that woman being like, oh my god, my boyfriend or my husband packed me dog food for my lunch, that's not particularly embarrassing. What becomes embarrassing is the reaction of the woman after receiving a ton of comments telling her, hey, this is not okay, you should divorce your husband, you should break up with your boyfriend. She will go on her social media pages, either in the comments or in a brand new TikTok, saying that she actually loves her husband or her boyfriend very much, and that we don't actually understand their relationship, and that we should stop commenting because what she showed was only a 10-second or 30-second clip of their life, and we need to stop being so judgmental because he's actually a really nice guy and he actually loves her very much, and we just don't know anything. Can you tell that there have been so many TikToks to the point where I now memorize their speech, and it ends up being the same speech every single time? Well, you guys don't actually know what my relationship is like. You don't know what my relationship is like behind closed doors. And although that may be true, it's still like, wait, girl, he packed you dog food. Maybe that's all we need to know about your relationship. Maybe that's all we need to understand about your relationship and understand that your relationship is awful. What's also interesting about these TikToks is that it usually starts with a woman being like, oh my god, you guys, look at what my boyfriend or my husband did. And she's obviously making that TikTok or that social media post in an attempt to be relatable or be funny. But then again, like I said, the reactions, the comments that she receives end up being something that she never thought they would be. They end up being comments that are telling her to leave that man. And it, I guess, ends up being unexpected for her, and then that's when she turns around and makes that TikTok or comments those comments of her saying, well, you guys don't actually know my relationship, and you guys don't actually know that he loves me very much and I love him very much, and we're committed to each other, and we said vows to each other, and I'm not going to break up with him, I'm not going to divorce him because he's actually the best person ever, and this was just his funny way of joking around with me. This, like I said, is not just embarrassing, it's also infuriating and makes her look kind of pathetic, if I'm being honest. What do you mean you're defending the guy that openly admitted on camera that he won't sweep up coffee grounds that he himself spilled because it's your job to sweep? And that's what I personally believe people are thinking about when they see their favorite influencer get into a relationship. It's that thought of, how long will it be until my favorite influencer's content switches to all about her boyfriend? Or worse, how long will it be until my favorite influencer is making a TikTok about her incompetent husband, only for her to turn around and defend her incompetent husband? What adds to that feeling of having a boyfriend being embarrassing is also the fact that it's not just one type of man acting this way or acting in such a way that makes it embarrassing for a woman to defend him. It's all different kinds of men. If you are on the side where you're seeing TikToks of women sharing their incompetent boyfriends and husbands, you'll see that often these men have many different professions, many different hobbies, look differently, are of different races. It's not just one kind of man where you can, as a woman, say, oh, this type of man has a reputation, I'm not going to date him. And that's kind of what used to be the thing back before having a boyfriend was embarrassing, is men used to have reputations, like specific type of men used to have specific types of reputations, like never date a finance guy because he's going to cheat on you, never date a sports player because he's going to cheat on you because he's a player, right? But nowadays, those types of stereotypes and reputations don't apply to specific types of men. They kind of apply to every kind of man. If your man has a PhD, he might cheat on you. But also, if your man doesn't have a PhD and only finished high school, he might also cheat on you, or he might also practice weaponized incompetence just to the same level as the man who has a PhD. It really is unpredictable, and it becomes really hard, and it has become really hard for women to choose a quality partner that they can spend the rest of their lives with without having any major problems such as cheating or weaponized incompetence. And I've talked about weaponized incompetence on my podcast before, but just to give you guys a refresher, weaponized incompetence is when a person will pretend like they don't know how to do something in an attempt to get you to stop asking them to do something. So for example, if you ask your partner, hey, can you unload the dishwasher? And they don't want to unload the dishwasher, but they also want to make it look like they're listening to you, they will do a bit of what is kind of known as malicious compliance, where they will unload the dishwasher, but then they won't put the dishes away where they belong. And so when you tell them, hey, why did you just pile the dishes on the table or on the counter, why didn't you put them away? They will tell you, well, you didn't tell me to put them away, you just told me to unload the dishwasher. This typically applies to men or women who their objective is to get you to not ask them to do something. Whereas autistic people sometimes are genuine, like, wait, you didn't tell me to do X, Y, and Z, so I didn't do X, Y, and Z. I'm sorry, I didn't know that you wanted me to do that. But yeah, like I said, the goal with weaponized incompetence is to get you to to stop asking them to do something. This also applies to when you have kids. If you ask your partner, hey, can you change the baby's diaper? They will change the baby's diaper, but they might not clean the poop really well. And so then your baby will develop a rash. And so then it becomes safer and easier for you to just handle it yourself. And this is what we tend to see in these traditional gender role heterosexual relationships, is where the woman will ask her husband to do something, typically chore related, and the husband will do it so awfully that the woman ends up doing everything in her house, and the only thing that the man contributes to the household and to the family is going to work. And sometimes not even that, sometimes it's also the woman having to go to work and so it ends up becoming a partnership where she is a single mom in a married relationship, right? In a committed relationship. So that's what I mean by weaponized incompetence, and that is how I'm using it in this context. But yeah, like I said, it's any kind of man. You could see a man reading feminist theory and taking notes and annotating his book, and he will still turn around and unload the dishwasher, but pile all the dishes on top of the counter and then tell you, well, you didn't tell me to put the dishes away, you only told me to unload the dishwasher. It really is unpredictable, and like I said, it has become really hard for women to find a quality lifetime partner. And you could also make the argument, kind of adding on to my last statement, that it has always been hard for women to find a quality lifelong partner, but we have just never talked about it before, and this is the first time that we're all kind of talking about it. And this actually kind of fits into the theory of, well, why do these women share these TikToks anyway? If so many people around the globe really are criticizing these traditional gender role heterosexual relationships, why are women in such relationships even sharing their incompetent husbands to begin with? The theory goes that it is part of their culture. In many cultures around the world, but especially kind of Christian cultures where, these heterosexual traditional gender role relationships thrive and are most popular, you will see a culture of older women kind of making fun of their husbands, where they will sit around a living room at Thanksgiving and they will be like, oh my god, you're never gonna believe what my husband did. He changed the baby's diaper, but still, I guess, didn't wipe the baby well, and so my baby developed a rash. And all the other women, instead of saying, oh my god, that's kind of a red flag, you should leave that man, they instead will be like, oh, girl, men. It's so funny. Men are just so funny. Like, we have to teach them everything. We have to hold their hand and teach them how to change a diaper. Even though the nurse probably already taught him how to change a diaper when they brought the baby home from the hospital. But yeah, that is kind of the culture surrounding these kinds of conversations, is that women, and especially, older women or women who have been in long-term relationships, instead of warning other women to not get into such a relationship, they instead will laugh about the incompetencies of their husbands. And they will make it a joke, and they will kind of, laugh it off and say, oh my god, men will be men, I guess. The thing about women laughing about the various incompetencies of their husbands started as a survival strategy back when women were not allowed to get a divorce just because their husband was toxic, or even because their husband was abusive. A lot of the time, women could not get a divorce even if their husband was abusive. So it started as a bit of a survival strategy, and women teaching other women to just take it because that would be the safest. It would be dangerous for you to be a social pariah. It would be dangerous for people to be talking about how you got divorced and how you're no longer a good woman. It would be dangerous for you to contradict what your husband is saying. So just laugh and smile and pretend like everything is okay. But because these coping mechanisms have been passed down from generation to generation, women nowadays are still using those same coping mechanisms, despite us having even more freedoms than our ancestors could ever dream of. And I actually read a post a couple of days ago that said something along those lines. My ancestors would be so happy to see the freedoms that I now have, and I cannot take that for granted. And that's what I think a lot of these women need to hear, is that you now have the freedoms that your grandma, your great grandma, your great 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 grandma dreamed of and hoped for. And it is a shame that you're not using it and that you are instead falling to the same coping mechanisms that they fell to as a means of survival. We now have more means of survival. We now have more ways to survive, and we should be using them without shame, because divorce is now so common that it is ridiculous for anyone to shame you for getting a divorce. We also now have the access to get a bank account without having a man co-sign for it. We also have the freedom to own our own house, to buy our own apartment, again, all without the consent of a man. And again, it would be a shame for you to not use those freedoms and those rights that your grandparents, your grandma, your great grandma fought for, all so that you can say that you're married, also that you can say that you're taken. So then when these women post their incompetent boyfriends or husbands, they expect that exact same reaction because that is the culture in which they have been raised in. That is the culture of accepting men being purposefully incompetent. And again, key word, purposefully. I don't want to hear any bean soup comments being like, but what if this man has blah blah blah? No, I mean a man who is being purposefully incompetent with the end goal or the end objective being that he doesn't have to do any housework or any childcare for that matter. So then when these women post those TikToks and end up getting the complete opposite reaction that they expected, because that's kind of how the internet works. Again, from my privacy episode that I did a couple of weeks ago, if you're posting something to a specific audience, you have to make sure that there's a very high likelihood that it will go to everyone. It won't just go to that specific group of people that you want it to go to. But when inevitably their TikTok reaches a larger audience that does not find this kind of behavior funny or acceptable, they get defensive. Like I said last week, it's kind of like holding up a mirror to their delusional shield that they've built around themselves to protect their life, to protect their misery. And it also becomes something that they have never seen before. Their moms, their grandmas, they've never had to deal with any other women telling them, you need to leave that man. Because back in the day, divorce came with a stigma. I mean, I think up until the 70s, when women were finally able to get their own credit card without having a man sign for it, divorce was very highly stigmatized because marriage was kind of the only way that women had rights. And in a lot of these social circles where traditional heterosexual relationships are the most sought after, it does tend to become unpopular because it tends to go against religious beliefs. So it makes sense that not only older women are telling younger women to never get married, but also that just people around the world who either are in relationships or are not in relationships are finding that kind of content so embarrassing, and even more are finding that whenever their favorite influencer gets into a relationship, it kind of makes that influencer take aura hits. Or however you use that phrase. I don't know. That aura is for a generation below me, okay? I don't know how to use that word. Also, not to mention, older women are telling younger women to not get married because it does unfortunately become a bit of a danger that you have to take. Just think about how many judges have told women that their abusive ex-husbands or abusive ex-boyfriends still get to have custody over their kids because he's not abusive, you just made him angry. Which then obviously leads to the woman still having to be in contact with her abusive ex-partner because the abusive ex-partner still has custody over their child. What's really interesting to me is seeing how kind of sharply the tide shifted, if it has kind of shifted at all. Let's talk about it. So about 6 months ago, I uploaded an episode titled The Rise to Conservatism. I think it's actually titled The Rise to Conservatism is Really Concerning, but it's something along those lines. I uploaded an episode titled something along those lines where I talked about women like Ballerina Farms and Nora Smith popularizing this sort of trad wife content. Now again, if you don't know what a trad wife is, it stands for traditional wife, where the wife will stay at home, bake, cook, take care of the kids, and live a soft life. This kind of content became highly popularized, and so many women, influencer or not, started hoping and wishing for that kind of life and trying to achieve that kind of life. So they started seeking out men who would be willing to provide for them so that they could stay at home, cook, bake, and take care of the kids. I talked about it in that episode, but that kind of trend is very concerning, especially when women are giving up their financial freedom and are willing to do joint finances in order to stay at home and cook and bake, because having joint finances, like I said in my last episode, can be a vessel to financial abuse. That's not to say that if you have joint finances that you are being financially abused, like I said in my last episode, but it is easier for you to become financially abused if you do not have your own separate finances. And even if you're not being financially abused, if you have joint finances and then it turns out you have to get a divorce or you fell out of love with your husband, it becomes so much harder to get divorced with the joint finances, because then you have to decide, okay, well, what was the percentage of each partner contributing, and how much does that joint account have to be separated, right? Did you contribute 40%? Did you contribute 50%? Was it 50-50? Was it 40-60? Was it 70-30? And then sometimes the women end up, or not sometimes, most of the time, women end up with the lesser amount because they ended up being a stay-at-home wife. Along with the shift in conservatism came things such as pink jobs and blue jobs, where women were kind of proudly proclaiming that their husbands would not allow them to do anything. They would not allow them to drive. They would not allow them to carry grocery bags inside their home. They would not allow them to do the dishes. They would not allow them to carry heavy things. And women were proudly proclaiming, like, isn't my husband so great? He's not letting me do anything. And it, again, like I said, it became something to achieve. It became something to want. You would see other women in the comments being like, oh, this is the life I want. I also want a husband that doesn't let me do anything. Guys, I don't think that's a life that you should want at all. But now, 6 months later, after I upload that episode, we're now seeing a sharp shift in, well, having a relationship is kind of embarrassing. But are we really, or is the internet just becoming more and more divided? I think this shift is worth noting, and this shift is causing some sort of impact away from the conservative shift that we had a couple of months ago. But I don't think it's happening quickly enough, and I think this is because of the financial crisis that we find ourselves in. I'm not sure if I've mentioned this before somewhere, but this financial crisis kind of explains why people are acting the way that they're acting. The financial crisis also explains the shift to conservatism, which I will talk about briefly. So basically, whenever there is a financial crisis, trends tend to go more conservative. Women tend to dress more conservatively, with less color, with less self-expression. They also tend to hope for a soft wife life where they are stuck at home cooking and baking until their husband comes home from work. And this is all because not having financial security makes you yearn and hope for somebody who can financially provide for you. So that's when the dream becomes, my husband won't let me do anything. Isn't that so great? Because it's a sign that you are not in charge of the finances. It's a sign that you don't have that financial burden, that financial stress of, oh, I have to pay my bills. It's why so many women nowadays are saying, but why do we even want to have a corporate job? Like, why is that a dream to achieve? I don't want to have a corporate job. I don't want to go to university and get a degree. I want to have a husband. That is my only goal and ambition. Because having a husband typically and traditionally means having a financial provider. And that relieves that stress. But also, this financial crisis explains why we're seeing so many people react so negatively to the women that are uploading these TikToks of their incompetent husbands. So many people are saying, girl, if you're not going to leave him, don't even come to us for help. Handle it all on your own. And it's because during a financial crisis, many people find themselves having to do the hard work themselves. So whenever somebody is kind of unwilling to do the hard work themselves, people's reaction stems from a lack of empathy. It stems from a place of, well, if I'm doing the hard work myself because we're living in a financial crisis and times are tough, you should be able to do the hard work yourself. And I cannot afford to extend any more energy or empathy towards you if you are not going to help yourself, because I am extending all of my time, effort, and energy in surviving. So you're on your own. It kind of also explains the shift away from empathy towards mental health issues, but I guess that's a topic for another day. But yeah, I think this financial crisis is informing both situations and is making both situations worse. I do believe that with empathy and with understanding, these women would be more likely to leave their incompetent husbands, but because the financial crisis is making people act out of a lack of empathy towards these women, and because the financial crisis is making these women feel financially safer with a financial provider, they're not leaving. Not only is the angry mob of comments telling them that their relationship sucks and making them defensive and making them kind of stand 10 toes down on staying in such a relationship, the financial crisis is also making them stressed. Like, well, if I leave my husband, I'm not going to have that extra income, and also I have kids to feed. I'm not going to leave my husband because being with my husband is the cheaper route, or even safer route. But yeah, I do find it interesting how 6 months ago we were, having these women showing off their high value men that were not allowing them to do anything, which is abuse. But now we're seeing such a drastic shift. It's so funny and interesting to me. It kind of went from women being like, I see your incompetent husband and I raised you, me bragging about my super amazing husband, which is also kind of abusive, but we're not going to talk about it. To now, I see your incompetent husband and I raise you, my really awesome single life, where I don't have to worry about feeding 4 children, even though I technically only birthed 3. Which, by the way, is not me saying that any of the women that are showing off their better husbands or better boyfriends or showing off their amazing single life are doing so maliciously. However, I do think it's as a result of people just only caring about themselves on social media. Like, and this is kind of a tangent, but have you ever posted something on social media where you're saying something like, oh, my cat died, and then all of a sudden you see a bunch of comments of, oh, so sorry to hear, anyway, this is my cat, or, oh, holding my cat extra tight tonight. And so instead of offering you empathy, people are just offering you their own lived experiences, so it's kind of like not helpful at all. I do think it's kind of a symptom of that, but I also think it's these women showing off their better husbands, better boyfriends, and better life as a way of telling these women, hey, you can live a better life. I am living a better life. I used to be in your shoes and now look at where I am. You can be here too. You just have to take that step. You just have to start that. You have to take the step, I hope you understand what I'm trying to say. So that's what I think has been happening here. I do think it's more important than ever to think about why you want a relationship before getting into a relationship. You have to think about what you want out of the relationship, what your deal breakers are, what you absolutely would not be able to tolerate versus what you would be able to work through with a marriage counselor or relationship counselor. Are you someone that values your independence more than being with someone, or are you someone that values being with someone more than your independence? And if you do value being with someone more than your independence, what will it take for you to leave that person? Will it take a lot, or will it only take a little bit? Are you someone that enjoys the dating process, or do you hate the dating process? Is that going to be something that's going to inform the way that you react to problems in the relationship? For example, if you hate the dating process and you have a problem in your relationship, are you someone that's going to be more likely to sweep that problem under the rug? Or are you someone that's going to, versus the opposite, if you enjoy the dating process, are you someone that's going to quickly break up with your partner because they did something wrong, even though the something wrong wasn't even that wrong to begin with? You just are not the kind of person to commit. Those are things that you have to think about before getting into a relationship, because especially, like I already mentioned, getting into a relationship not only is embarrassing, but it's also kind of dangerous. I'm going to talk about this in my next episode, but the amount of women that have died because they rejected their boyfriends, their husbands, or even they rejected a stranger that came up to them and asked them out on a date is very concerning, which is why I'm saying getting into a relationship can be very dangerous and can be something that you really, really have to think about. And you really, really have to, unfortunately, be good at choosing. Unfortunately, that burden has now fallen upon the women choosing to be in a relationship. And that's not to fearmonger, of course, but I do want you guys to understand that even though you have hopes and dreams of having a soft wife life, you do have to be careful with the person and the partner that you choose to spend the rest of your life with, because being a soft wife leads to you not having your own independence, you not having your own job, you not having your own money, you not having your own activities or hobbies to focus on, or sometimes even having your own friends. Not all soft wife lives lead to that, but the soft wife life does have the potential to lead to that, which is something that you really have to be careful about. However, I'm saying all that while also keeping in mind that I think the pendulum can swing a little bit too far. I do agree that having a boyfriend seems less important than before and sometimes even embarrassing. However, I disagree with the conservative pipeline that this has now created. I love female independence, but I think some of the female independence creators have taken it a little bit too far and have turned into femcel creators. Again, I will talk about it next week, but femcel creators, in my opinion, have turned their content into justifying why they're single instead of actually advocating for female independence. But anyway, that is all that I have for you guys today. Let me know what you guys think about this topic, and let me know if you have found yourself in some kind of situation relating to this. Have you found yourself unfollowing someone because they got into a relationship, or have you found yourself having people unfollow you because you got into a relationship? Yeah, let me know what you think, and I will see you guys next week for the third and final installment of this little mini series that I'm doing about relationships. Also, make sure to check out the links in my description for not just my merch and my Tumblr page, but also my Patreon. I have finally uploaded a blooper compilation for my season 1 bloopers, and then once season 2 is over, I will be uploading a blooper compilation for season 2. And yeah, I think that's all that I have to say for today. I will see you guys next week. Bye!